Watch Tulsi Gabbard tell Lara Trump about why she ultimately decided to leave the left. Yeah, it's pretty insane, guys, because as I'm sure you all know, the left is a cult of insanity, all right? If you even slightly question them, they will go ballistic and destroy you. Well, Tulsi did more than question them. She said, hey, I'm done with you guys. Y'all are insane. So it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be interesting. I think you're going to enjoy it. But first, do me a big favor here. Like our video and share it around so we can keep bringing you all this great, hard-hitting content. As always, Patriots, I'm your host, Arian, and this is Resist the Mainstream.
It's Tulsi Gabbard. It's sort of amazing. If you look back 5 years ago, you ran for president as a Democrat.
Yeah.
Could you ever have pictured that you would right now be sitting as part of Donald Trump's administration?
It's not something that I pictured back then. And quite frankly, it wasn't something that I pictured even a few months ago. It's been an incredible experience for me to just be a small part of helping President Trump get elected and to now be in a position to help carry out his mandate, to end that weaponization and politicization of our intelligence community, of our law enforcement. It's a privilege.
You are a person who can speak to that to a certain extent. You are also the first female combat veteran to be Director of National Intelligence. How does your past experience help you in this role, and what are you taking from what you've done in the past and utilizing it now?
Shortly after criticizing Vice President Kamala Harris, who had just become candidate Kamala Harris after President Biden stepped aside, I was very quickly placed on this little-known domestic terror watch list called Quiet Skies. Wow. There's a long story I can tell you there about what that entailed with surveillance and federal air marshals being tasked with an active targeting package. It really speaks to how these institutions that exist to ensure the safety, security, and freedom of the American people being weaponized against the American people actually creates a greater national security risk. When we, the American people, cannot trust those who have the responsibility to keep us safe.
There is a fine line, though, because I think people wonder, how can you ensure the safety of the American people, but also protect their privacy and from government intrusion?
It is a heavy responsibility, and it is the most essential one. For too long, as you know, we've seen people in positions of great power tell us that, oh, well, if we just violate your civil liberties and freedom a little bit, it's okay because we're trying to keep you safe. Unfortunately, we've seen this for decades, and the more our freedoms are eroded, the more the foundations of our democracy are eroded. So, a lot of people will talk about national security or security threats, but there's two components of that leaders have to really uphold, which is, yes, there's such a thing as a threat to physical security, but the threat to our freedom and our liberty must be balanced right alongside that threat to our physical security.
You guys remember when the whole fake news media was slandering Tulsi Gabbard, saying that she's, an agent of Assad? Right, she's in Assad's pocket, Putin's pocket, everything else. She's with the enemies. As of course the enemies as defined by the U.S. government. Right, they never explain why either Assad or Putin are enemies. Regardless of what you think of them, that's just the truth. They don't explain that. It's just, oh, they're bad and evil, and if you talk to them, you're evil too. It's really quite reminiscent of that infamous line that George W. Bush put forward after 9/11. Very shortly after, he said, "You're either with us or you're with the terrorists." I believe that's what he said. And then, use that to justify putting in the Patriot Act, which completely eroded civil liberties in the United States, arguably, basically gave the FBI and CIA power to conduct warrantless surveillance on random Americans' communications. I mean, it's as simple as them saying, I don't like the way that guy smells, even though they can't even smell you. They're behind their little computer. And we're going to pull up his phone records and his text messages now and investigate him. It's really quite disgusting stuff. And in a lot of cases, you actually seen them create crimes, all right? There was that case, infamous case, just a few years ago, actually, where an FBI agent actually convinced a terrorist to go out and start shooting at people and then fled the scene after he started doing it. Yeah, I didn't make that up. It's not a joke. You can look into that. Pretty insane stuff. Now, circling back to the attacks on Tulsi Gabbard, you can see why they're doing it, all right? Remember the propaganda that was going on during the early on of the Syrian war, during the beginning of Trump's presidency? You had all these, they showed these chemical attacks, which for the record, they were obviously real and it's horrible. But there was always this implication that, oh yeah, Assad did it. Yeah, U.S. intelligence says Assad did it. Did they ever bother to provide any evidence or proof? No, of course they didn't. And, I'm just going to say it. We have been lied to by the United States government before. So I have every right as an American citizen to question them without being labeled as, oh, he's a crazy, kooky conspiracy theorist. Yeah, or maybe I'm just not an idiot and I think for myself. Ever thought about that?
Go back a moment to your previous life as a Democrat. You had a very famous sort of viral moment in a presidential debate against Kamala Harris where you kind of called her out.
Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California, and she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
I think a lot of people look at that moment and they say, is that the moment that Tulsi Gabbard started to maybe change her view on things? Was that part of your political conversion, that moment?
That whole experience of running for president in the Democratic primary in 2020 that really exposed the Democrat Party's focus on things that did not matter to the American people. I go back to 2016 when President Trump was elected and how very quickly the Democrat Party leadership, the party that I once joined that fought for free speech, that stood up for civil liberties, a party that had many voices who called for peace instead of war, they very quickly flipped the script because now all they cared about was defeating Donald Trump and silencing those who supported him. And so the erosion, the shift in the Democratic Party ultimately made it so that I had to leave the Democrat Party. It was completely unrecognizable from the party that I had joined over 20 years before.
I think a lot of people watched that whole process and they said, these people have learned nothing. They are ranting and raving out there about transparency, about saving taxpayer dollars, about the American people actually understanding what is going on.
I was with President Trump when I was sworn in the Oval Office, and something that he said that day really struck home because he talked about needing to have people in our government who care. And so when I asked myself, how is it that the Democrat Party still hasn't heard the voices of the American people who are sick and tired of our taxpayer dollars being wasted?
As it turns out, some of those taxpayer dollars are already being saved under Tulsi's tenure.
So you were confirmed, and then 6 o'clock the next morning, you're on an airplane, and it's been a rapid pace. Has there been anything that surprised you that you didn't expect so far? I mean, is DOJ involved in what you're doing?
The ODNI itself is a pretty small organization compared to most other elements. But even in that small organization, getting rid of DEI saved American taxpayers roughly $20 million. Wow. Literally with the stroke of President Trump's pen. Just in my organization alone is a great thing, and we're excited to be able to uncover more.
Yeah, we'll take that for sure.
Now, solidly on President Trump's team, she's making clear common sense is making a comeback.
Tulsi mentioning DEI and getting rid of it from her department kind of reminds me of when she first announced that she was leaving the Democrat Party back in, I believe, 2022. It was only 2 years ago. Really recent in the grand scheme of things. She very specifically cited anti-white racism as one of her biggest issues that she has with the Democrat Party. And that's why she had to say, hasta la vista, baby. And I really like that, appreciate that, all right? And that's important. I think more important than people realize. All right, let's think about this for a second. How many Republicans do you know who will call out anti-white racism by name? Name one. Right, exactly. It's kind of hard. You probably had to think about that for a second. And many of the people who you might think, oh yeah, he probably probably didn't. All right, and that actually, it's really quite admirable. I have my issues with Tulsi Gabbard. I think, she's very far left on certain things. I don't necessarily agree with her. But she seems to at least have a soul, unlike most people, many Republicans included in politics, who seem to just be too chicken and afraid to actually say the truth for what it is. And Tulsi Gabbard definitely is willing to say at least some of the truth. And you know what? God bless her for that. With all that being said, everybody, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked it, please be sure to comment below, or if you didn't like it, you can comment as well. Hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you again soon. God bless.